And it's so, so, so good. There's nothing wrong with this book. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this book. I have nothing to improve about it. Like, it's amazing. Period. I have looked back on all of the books I read throughout 2020, and I have put together a list of my top 10 personal favorite books that I read this year. Before I get into that though, I do want to say thank you to Ruffled Pages Apparel. They gave me the sweatshirt of a book that looks like a vajayjay if you look really closely. So I'm going to link their shop down below if you want to check out their stuff. I also want to thank today's sponsor, which is Fetch Rewards. This is a very fitting sponsor for today because, as you know, I am a cheap bitch. All of the books I've read this year were from the library because I'm always looking to save money. So if you are also in that similar mindset, then I think you would be interested in Fetch Rewards because they offer you free rewards on groceries, and all you need to do is just scan your grocery receipts. So if you're already doing that, you might as well just save money as well. It's easy to scan the receipts and it's easy to save. It's literally low effort, which is what we're all about here on this channel. They have thousands of participating products, so if you ever buy one of them as you would in your daily routine, you can scan a receipt, redeem your points, and spend a reward from your mobile device all in a matter of minutes. The points also turn into gift cards, which you can use for various things like specific restaurants or Amazon or even like Visa and MasterCards. You can earn points from anywhere, so it's basically any grocery store, anytime you purchase from Amazon, and then all those points can funnel into something that you would get for free. Fetch shoppers can now submit receipts from all restaurants and retail stores, which is super helpful if you are already buying a shit ton of stuff for Christmas gifts. So if you're interested, you can check out the link in my description below. If you use the code Cindy, you can get 4,000 points if you submit your first receipt. This is a limited time offer. If you're already gonna be spending a bunch of money for the holidays, might as well take advantage of it. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks again for sponsoring, and let's dive into my favorite books of 2020. Since we're talking about my favorite books of the year, I feel like it's only fitting that I do that while I eat my favorite food of all time, which is poke bowls. This is a Hawaiian dish that you can customize with seafood. I could eat this shit every day. So I looked back on all the books I read this year, and I put together my personal top 10 books of 2020. I might put out another video where I recommend books where I didn't necessarily love them, but I think other people might like them because people have different tastes. But for this video, these are my personal favorites of the year. I have ranked them in order, and we're gonna go from the bottom of the list to the top of the list where I talk about my very favorite of all time. For number 10, I'm gonna go with The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. I read this in the beginning of the year. It was depressing as fuck. By the way, that's gonna be an ongoing trend for like the majority of the books on this list. This is a historical novel about two black boys who grew up in the 1960s. Oh my God. Sorry, this shit is spicy. I have hemorrhoids right now, and I know I'm not supposed to eat spicy food, but I can't stop. Speaking of burning assholes, that's what the two main characters have to deal with when they get sent to reform school, because this is 1960s, they're in Florida, and they're two black boys. They're not gonna have a good time. It's called the Nickel Academy, and it's where delinquents are sent to. It's just a place where people and authority figures beat the shit out of young black boys, and it's awful. And it's based on actual schools that have existed back then. To be honest, I think they still exist today. I decided to write down quotes of each book that I'm going to list in this video. And there was one quote that I liked from this book that says, "There are people who trick you and deliver emptiness with a smile, while others rob you of your self-respect. You need to remember who you are." What I thought was interesting is that the main character is precocious, and something that he thinks about a lot is what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. says. He constantly thinks about a quote where Dr. King talks about still loving people who are cruel to you. And the main guy is thinking, that's kind of bullshit. Why would I love people who treat me like crap? It's this questioning of such an awful system that I think adds to the realism of what a kid is going through during that time. The reason why I'm putting this at the bottom of my top 10 list specifically is because even though I think the author is a very skilled writer, I did find that his writing kind of veers towards more journalistic instead of being more emotional or showing the psyche and internal thoughts that the main character was going through. It's all written kind of very matter-of-factly, and I'm not really a fan of that because this is already based on something that's real. right? So you could just look it up on Wikipedia or read a memoir. But if you're writing a fiction, I really want to be enveloped inside these characters and learn more about like what they're going through on the inside. I would have liked more of an internal narrative because I think that would have driven home that emotional experience of the book. At number 9, I have placed The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna, which is funny because my next video is going to be about my worst books of 2020, and her other book made it on the list. So she has the range, really. The novel that I did like from her on this list is The Nightingale, which is a historical fiction based on World War II. It follows 2 sisters. One of them is an obedient housewife who has to say goodbye to her husband when he goes off to the war. The other sister is the more rebellious one. She ends up joining the resistance against the Nazis, so that's pretty much like a badass bitch move on her part. The writing was so good. It was so descriptive and lovely. I buddy read this with a friend who wasn't a fan of the writing just because she felt like it was overly detailed, but I really liked it. I was like, yeah, tell me the specific wood tile that the character is stepping on. It is a very slow book, but I didn't mind that because I just enjoyed the writing so much. I felt like I was being taken on this slow journey of impending doom because this is World War II, so obviously shit is about to go down. I'm putting this near the bottom of the list because there's already so many World War II books, and do I cry reading every one of them? Yes, but does that mean that they're all different and unique? Not necessarily. This book could have been a bit better if it had focused more on the sister relationship, because I think that was the unique point of the book. You got to see the viewpoints of 2 sisters who were completely different from one another. So this is a nice way to show the role of women during World War II. In fact, there's actually a quote that I really liked where it says, "Men tell stories, women get on with it. For us, it was a shadow war. There were no parades for us when it was over, no medals or mentions in history books. We did what we had to do during the war, and when it was over, we picked up the pieces and started our lives over." Women have played invisible roles during the war, but they were monumental in making sure that there was peace and resolution at the end of the war. And you can see those roles from the point of view of the 2 main characters. But I feel like we didn't really get to take advantage of it as much as we could, specifically with how disjointed their storylines were. A lot of the story did get diluted from romance that I don't think was well developed enough for me to care. I would have gladly traded away any of the romances if that meant we had more screen time with the sisters. Whether that's just like the sisters thinking about each other even though they have individual journeys, or having flashbacks and memories of what they've been through. I feel like that would have strengthened the whole theme and purpose of the story. At number 8, I am going to put Men We Reaped by Jesmyn Ward. This is a very short nonfiction book where the author reflects on 5 men that she had lost throughout her life. She lost them through various things like drugs and accidents and suicide, just all the fun little things that disproportionately come to people who live in poverty, and particularly to Black men. So this whole book, she is trying to find these patterns and connections to why this keeps on happening. She's able to connect their deaths and the meaning of their deaths to the history of racism and the economic struggles that they face, which inadvertently is what causes drug addiction and a dissolution of family relationships and just instability in general. A quote that I really liked says, "We tried to outpace the thing that chased us, that said, 'You are nothing.' We tried to ignore it, but sometimes we caught ourselves repeating what history said, mumbling along, brainwashed, 'I am nothing.' We drank too much, smoked too much, were abusive to ourselves, to each other. We were bewildered. There is a great darkness bearing down on our lives and no one acknowledges it." It's so much deeper than just these individual cases or these individual circumstances. It plays into this systemic, bigger story. When you get to the last part, where she talks about her brother, you can feel the grief just pouring through the pages. Like, that shit was potent. I'm putting Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng as number 7. This is a contemporary book where the main character is a Karen, because she's like a soccer mom that takes care of these perfect kids and has the perfect husband and has the perfect life, but all of that gets fucking ruined to shambles and exposed because there's another character that shows up to the neighborhood named Mia Warren. She is like the foil to the Karen character because she's a single mom. She has more of like a nomadic lifestyle where she and her daughter are always moving to a new place to place. Their 2 families end up having their lives intersect with one another because the daughter becomes really good friends with the white kids that Karen has, and then Karen kind of like has a weird feeling about Mia because Mia essentially goes against everything that Karen believes in. Her name isn't actually Karen, by the way, but for the sake of the story, she basically is one. The plot begins when Karen's family friend tries to adopt this Chinese American baby who they found from an immigrant mother who had abandoned the baby when she was going through a really hard time. So then there ends up being like this custody battle, but the two main characters, the Karens and Mia Warren, are on opposite sides of what they believe should happen with the baby. And the main character gets really into the custody case and feels threatened by it because now that Mia is involved in it, it's feeling personal. So Karen is just like, I know this bitch is hiding something. I'm gonna look up her past and try to investigate what she's really hiding. But in turn, she also has some secrets of her own. So again, just suburban family drama bullshit. I did not think I would like this book because, I don't know, I guess I just didn't think I would be into suburban drama, but I was really into it. I was so hooked while listening to the audiobook. I finished this in like 2 days. When I read a contemporary book that tries to deal with race and racism as its themes, a lot of it is very overt and in your face. And whenever I say that I wish it had more nuance, I'm talking about the level of nuance that Little Fires Everywhere had. The book specifically, not the TV show. The TV show is very much in your face, but the book was very subtle and low-key about it. I really liked that because I think that's how it is in real life. And the fact that it's so subtle gives the readers room to interpret the story for themselves instead of being fed like a lesson. It's something that you have to kind of like deal with like who is right and who is wrong and what makes a good mother and what makes a bad mother. And I think the custody case that plays into the story is such a good way of showcasing the differences between two people. This specific custody case, despite not being related to the two main characters, was such a good way in showing where their different values are and why they have different values because of the way that they grew up. I do think the weakness with the story is that we spent a lot of time with Karen's kids, and I thought it was gonna like lead up to somewhere or build up to something, but ultimately I don't really think it did. There's something that happens in the ending. It involves the kids, and I think it would have been way more impactful if they had been developed more and we actually like cared about their story more. But because it wasn't, it was like, like really I only cared about what was going on between Karen and Mia Warren because that shit was juicy. A quote that I really liked from the book says, "One had followed the rules and one had not, but the problem with rules was that they implied a right way and a wrong way to do things, when in fact, most of the time they were simply ways, none of them quite wrong or quite right, and nothing to tell you for sure what side of the line you stood on." At number 6 is the most fun book that I read this year, which is One to Watch. This is a contemporary rom-com that is based on the Bachelorette reality TV show. The main character is a plus-size beauty/fashion blogger who gets invited to be the next Bachelorette. If you are already a person who watches trashy reality TV, you would be into this book because it has very similar like plot twists and turns and drama that you would like from binging a reality TV show, except it's like in the book format. And what's cool is that this time you get to see like the behind the scenes stuff of what the characters are actually thinking, not what just is portrayed on the show. Beyond the reality show shenanigans, there's also this ongoing journey of the main character finding self-love and acceptance, which she thought she had, but a lot of her insecurities were really challenged throughout the book. And by the way, if you deal with any body image issues, you probably shouldn't read the book because it can be very triggering. A lot of awful things happen to the main character, but it was such an accurate depiction of the way that our culture treats fat people, especially someone who is in the public eye. Because what's interesting about this main character who gets put on the show is that you get snippets of all of these blog posts or internet forum discussions of people talking about her and picking her apart. And I think that's so realistic to the way that we politicize fat bodies instead of just letting them exist. Just by her being on the show, it was seen as like a political act, and so many people had everything to say about it and argue about it over. You really have to roll with the punches that the main character goes through before she goes on this journey of accepting herself and loving herself. If that's not your thing, like if you just want to read about fat people being happy and not be reminded of how shitty society is, don't read this book. But if you're okay with that, then this book is very, very juicy. It's like painfully like realistic with how some of them treat her, but it also gets pretty juicy in terms of the plot, and that's what I was in there for. What I like most about this book is that It wasn't about her loving a man, despite the whole premise of the reality show that she's on. It was ultimately about her learning how to love herself, which is the hardest thing that you can do. A quote I really liked was when the main character tells this guy who has been treating her very poorly, and she says, "Some part of me still feels like I should be grateful for any attention you show me, even if it's nothing close to the way I want to be loved." And I think that's super true to any girl out there with low self-esteem and doesn't know her worth yet. You know, it hits home. The reason why it's not higher is because I disagree with some of the actions that the main character did in the third act of the book. To give her credit though, I did like the way that this third act ended up compared to how I've seen other third acts developed in other romance books. I feel like in the third act, the main character is always groveling to get their love back, as if they can't live without the other person. And what I liked about this book was that she did not do that. I didn't agree with her actions, but I will respect her for like owning up to it and being like, hey, it is what it is. I only got myself and that's okay. In fifth place, we have The Vanishing Half. This is a historical novel that follows multiple generations of people, but it starts off with these two twin sisters. And the weird thing about this town is like they're super into diluting their blackness. So they're black, but they really try to have light skin, like as light as possible. They're like, we gotta dilute this shit. It's the colorism for me, but you get to see like the impacts of what happens with these two sisters where one of them decides to move back to the town. She had that daughter with a dark-skinned man. So the daughter is like super dark-skinned. The other twin sister tries to live her life as a white person because she's white passing. So she marries a white dude. She has a very light-skinned daughter who doesn't even know that she's black, and she doesn't talk about her past at all. So their two daughters end up having their storylines intersect with one another. And it's cool to just see like these worlds collide and the way that they perceive their identity because of the way that their mothers or they themselves had chosen to approach their life. One of my favorite quotes says, "She hadn't realized how long it takes to become somebody else, or how lonely it can be living in a world not meant for you." That pretty much sums up the woman who tried to be white. That lady was a whole nother level. Like her internalized racism ran so fucking deep, but it was really interesting to read about, you know, in contrast to the other sister who learned to like embrace her blackness and really raise a strong, badass daughter that I fucking love. I'm putting this in the middle of the list because the first 1/3 of the book kind of took a while for me to get into just because it was extremely slow. But once we start to see the generations diverge and we start to see the daughters' lives and how they got impacted by the history and then how they connect later on, that's when shit got juicy. I liked seeing how differently people turned out and then how they can try to see if they can improve and repair themselves once they learn the mistakes of the past. So it's kind of like an interesting sociological character study. This also relates to my next book at number 4, My Dark Vanessa, which is by far the most depressing book I have read this year. This is a story that explores the psychological dynamics of a girl who was groomed by her high school English teacher when she was, I don't remember what her age was. I don't even want to know. Fuck, she was 15. She was a 15-year-old girl, and this creepy ass motherfucker right here basically abused her and groomed her and raped her. She's 15, he's 42. They develop this disgusting predatory relationship, and you follow 2 timelines in the book. You follow the earlier timeline when she was in high school, and then you follow present day where I think she's like in her 30s or late 20s or something like that. But the point is she's an adult, and you see like the consequences of what happened to her psychologically. In her present day, it takes place in 2017, which is actually around the same time when the Me Too movement started rising up. And she's in this really complicated place because there's actually news now that the teacher that had abused her has been abusing other girls. This journalist reaches out to her and wants her to like speak up and share her stories so that the other girls' stories can be more legitimate, because unfortunately when stories of abuse happens, you need multiple people to fucking step up to even be believed. But this puts her in a really tough position because she doesn't see herself as a victim. She has put so much of a barrier between like her true feelings and what happened, where she thinks like, well, it wasn't abuse. It is so fucking sad and repulsive because this shit gets graphic. Like, it's not a good time. What I thought this book did really well was putting multiple layers throughout the story, because it wasn't just about this individual case of the main character being groomed by this nasty pedophile. She added other layers of how other factors had enabled this to happen in the first place. It's not just the individual, but the culture that they grow up on. There's a lot of pop culture references, since this takes place in the early 2000s, that really shows like how pervasive it is that society sexualizes young women. There are side characters who have contributed to the complicity of the situation happening in the first place, because it didn't get stopped. There are people that could have stopped it, but they didn't for various reasons. I think there's also a lot of complicated discussions with victimhood. Something that she thinks about a lot is how victimhood is almost like encouraged for women. It's almost like when you're born a woman, it's automatically something that you have. And then that plays into like a complicated role when it comes to the Me Too movement, because that gets co-opted by journalism and clickbait. There's this part where she's coming to terms with the fact that this was abuse, and she basically lost her entire childhood to him. And she says, I can't lose the thing I've held on to for so long. I just really need it to be a love story. I really, really need it to be that. Because if it isn't a love story, then what is it? It's my life. This has been my whole life. And I think that does such a good job in showing how we minimize trauma, or we reframe the way that certain things happen so that we can cope with it. Like if we don't realize it's a bad thing, then maybe it's not actually a bad thing. But the fact is, it's happened and it's really fucking you up, like in present day. Like this bitch is depressed. I listened to the audiobook and I felt like I was stuck in her mind. So that was like double depression for me. Speaking of depression, at number 3, I'm gonna put Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. This is a memoir that is written by a therapist. She goes through these anecdotes from her own experiences with therapy, and also some of her experiences with 3 different clients that she saw regularly. She did change the details and the names of the people that she talked to, so you wouldn't be able to identify them. The author just comes across as super genuine and insightful in her writing. A lot of the insights that she wrote about were very applicable to my own mental health journey as well. One of those things being like how we stay in a negative mindset, because it's easier to stay into that place than trying to break free into a territory that you don't know and trying to give hope to something that is not going to work out. It's so much easier to just stick to your own habits, because at least when you're depressed, you know what you're signing up for. A quote I really liked says, "But part of getting to know yourself is to unknow yourself, to let go of the limiting stories you've told yourself about who you are so that you aren't trapped by them, so you can live your life and not the story you've been telling yourself about your life." I don't think the book is perfect, because sometimes it can feel pretty long-winded. I personally didn't really care about the author talking about her own therapy and her own personal story. That was like the least interesting part. But I was moved enough by the 3 patient stories that she talked about and felt emotionally resonant enough through that it compelled me enough to want to give it 5 stars. I still think it's a very strong book. Even if there are some parts that are not as interesting, it's still a very solid reminder to be compassionate to other people and also to yourself. For number 2, I am going to put a sci-fi novella called This Is How You Lose the Time War. Out of all the books I've read this year, this is the best writing that I have read. Like, I was hooked into this from the very, very beginning. The story follows 2 time travelers who work as secret spy agents, and they are on 2 opposing sides of the war. So their job is to travel through time and mess with various things in order for their side to win, kind of like the butterfly effect. One day, one of the agents decides to leave behind a letter that taunts the other agent that they're gonna win the war. And this begins this weird pen-pal relationship where they go through these different centuries and these different locations, and they leave notes behind for each other. But as they keep on writing to each other, they learn more about the other person, they open up more about themselves, and then romantic feelings start to develop. Let me read to you a quote that I really liked. "I love you, I love you, I love you. I'll write it in waves, in skies, in my heart. You'll never see, but you will know. I'll be all the poets. I'll kill them all and take each one's place in turn. And every time love's written in all the strands, it will be to you." And I'm like, damn bitch, you're really gonna kill all the poets? You really are whipped. The writing is so creative and abstract and lyrical. You're either gonna like it or you're not gonna like it. Like, you'll find it too confusing. The majority of people that I read this book with did not understand what was going on. I saw a tweet where someone said that this author just needs to pick a metaphor already, which is valid, but I also didn't care enough because I just loved how descriptive it was. There's just so many creative layers that the authors have put into it, and I fell in love with the writing. Out of all the fiction books I read, it would be my top favorite. In terms of nonfiction though, that goes to the book in first place, which is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This is a memoir written by an Asian woman who is actually where I'm from. She was the girl who had gotten raped behind a dumpster at a Stanford frat party. Her letter first became viral a couple of years ago. She wrote, I think it was like 12 pages that just described everything that she was going through as a victim. And that letter got posted on BuzzFeed and it became viral, but nobody really knew her name because she chose to be anonymous as Emily Doe. It wasn't until recently that she finally revealed her identity. She decided to publish this book that she had been working on for 2 years. She talks about her experience with sexual assault, and she goes through her entire journey with going through those trials and the slow ass justice system that we have and the disappointing results that we have where Brock Turner barely got any time in jail, and the repercussions of what she faced psychologically and on the internet, and all the ways that she dealt with her trauma or didn't deal with it and how she healed from it as well. This is such a good book to show how archaic the US justice system is and how we have this culture that protects predators and shames victims. This is honestly, I think, the best nonfiction book that I've read. She truly wrote her ass off. There were so many lines where I just had to stop and I was like, holy shit. I talked about this in detail in my monthly wrap up. I already read the quote in my other wrap up, so you can hear all the tidbits that I share there. But one quote that I didn't share that I will for this video was, I survived because I remained soft, because I listened, because I wrote, because I huddled close to my truth, protected it like a tiny flame in a terrible storm. Hold up your head when the tears come, when you are mocked, insulted, questioned, threatened, when they tell you you are nothing, when your body is reduced to openings. The journey will be longer than you imagined. Trauma will find you again and again. Do not become the ones who hurt you. Stay tender with your power. Never fight to injure, fight to uplift. Fight because you know that in this life you deserve safety, joy, and freedom. Fight because it is your life, not anyone else's. I did it and I am here. Looking back, all the ones who doubted or hurt or nearly conquered me faded away, and I am the only one standing. So now the time has come. I dust myself and go on. Wait, actually, okay, one last quote and then I'll end the damn video because this is already getting too long. Victims exist in a society that tells us our purpose is to be an inspiring story. But sometimes the best we can do is tell you we're still here, and that should be enough. Denying darkness does not bring anyone closer to the light. When you hear a story about rape, all the graphic and unsettling details, resist the instinct to turn away. Instead, look closer, because beneath the gore and the police reports is a whole beautiful person looking for ways to be in the world again. Literally one of the best books I've ever read. She has written everything so well. She has constructed her thoughts so beautifully. She's able to make connections to all the complicated feelings that she has and tie them into like these metaphors or these other anecdotes. And they just make so much sense in the way that she frames things. And it's so, so, so good. There's nothing wrong with this book. There's absolutely nothing wrong with this book. It's so fucking good. I have nothing to improve about it. Like, it's amazing. Period. Next time I'll see you, I'll talk about the worst books I read in 2020. Go ahead and unsubscribe from my channel. Goodbye.
How'd you know that this is real? How'd you know that I ain't crazy? I'm just gonna wing it still. You broke these walls I built.